everybody, and welcome to Mom Cooks Fast and Slow. I'm Alex Sullivan, and I'm delighted to have you at my kitchen table. Today, I have Elisa Bulgrin with me to discuss her at-home farm called the Longfield Farm. We talk gardening, vegetables and flowers, chicken coops, cooking, the idea of homesteading, and the exciting path her family is taking here in New Canaan. If you are local, be sure to check out her farm stand Fridays. I recently went to one, and they are a little slice of countryside heaven in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Elisa. Welcome to Mom Cooks Fast and Slow.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you today. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a few weeks. You have a self-operating farm at your house in New Canaan called Longfield Farm. And I wanted to kind of dive into what that consists of, how the vision started, where you got the idea to have your own farm, and then how it's grown since that initial start. So thought we'd start there. If you could just tell us a bit about yourself, a bit about Longfield Farm, and how it's come to be.
Well, first of all, I don't know if I'd use the word self-operating, but I guess I don't really know what that means. But my husband and I, like many people in our town of New Canaan, were in New York City, and when we got married, we knew that we wanted um, to to not just move out of the city, but we wanted space. I grew up in Australia. I grew up in Sydney, but it's a big part of Australian culture to spend time in the countryside. And my extended family are real farmers. I would say that my parents' farm was the toy farm. Well, there was cattle, but it wasn't like what my aunts and uncles do. They have serious farms. But I wanted that in my family's life. And my husband, he grew up in Long Island, I believe close to where you did, and he wanted something similar to that too. So we started looking in, Westchester and Fairfield counties, and we found this magical little piece of property in New Canaan. And we feel very blessed that we found it because New Canaan has such a great community. I think that, what's unique, maybe not unique, but a lot of people who live in New Canaan might have as much property as we do. Um, but we came to it with a very clear vision that we wanted to work the land a bit. There were no gardens. We always wanted to have, a vegetable garden because that was something I grew up with. And my husband was curious about things like making maple syrup and things of that nature. So one of the very first things we did was we got our John Deere tractor and our mower and our gator because we knew that I guess it feels a bit like cart before the horse with that stuff. But they've been wonderful tools in building the gardens and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think we were curious and we just got started. And there were some raised beds here. We've since removed them. My husband, before we had kids, we had a lot more time on our hands, and we used that time, those weekends, when we were both working, to start building. And we did a couple of really big projects back then, and we just caught the bug and haven't stopped.
So what do you currently have on your farm? You said vegetable garden, you tap your maple trees, I know have a big flower garden.
Yeah, so we started with a kitchen garden, and then we realized that that was quite shaded and not enough space. So we put in a big cutting garden that was about 4,000 square feet that had room for our chickens that we wanted to get. So we got our first flock of chickens. Um, and since then, that was about 4 years ago, I think, maybe five now. No, four. Um, this past winter, we worked to expand um, the garden. We doubled it in size um, and added another space, and we have some different ornamental, things around. But I'm very focused on growing flowers because that was sort of the thing that in growing our own vegetables and stuff, that was fun. But growing flowers are such a lovely thing to share, and people, people love them. So I started sharing them with friends, and then you know, was growing enough that I was like, okay, time to time to do something with these. So uh, Longfield Farm, the business sort of came from there. And there are a few people in our town working with flowers, which is such a lovely thing. Um, but I wanted to do something a little bit different, and that sort of spoke to the other things that we do here, growing vegetables. And um, we make maple syrup for ourselves. We would love to have a full operation with a sugar shack, and maybe in the future we'll have that. Um, uh, but for now, I source for the business part of Longfield. I source maple syrup and honey and jams from other sort of people doing what I do, so I can focus on the flowers and the vegetables, and then I bring in those other things for the baskets I do and stuff like that.
So, okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Free Press, but it's a new media outlet that an ex New York Times reporter started. And I love it. It's like old school journalism. They really dive into a bunch of different topics from all different perspectives. If anyone listening hasn't looked into the Free Press, the website is thefp.com. I highly recommend it. But anyway, they wrote a whole article on homesteading. The title of it was "Home is Where the Revolution Is." A growing number of Americans are rejecting processed food and living off the land. One of the reporters meets the homesteaders who say things mean more when you have less. Do you consider yourself a homesteader?
So that was the one question that you sent me that I chuckled a bit to myself, because I was like, gosh, is that what I put out into the world? No, I feel
Okay.
very far from a homesteader. I some of the flower farmers that I follow on Instagram, I'd say would consider themselves homesteaders. Their flower business is a small part of what they do, and they're making their bread, and they're preserving their eggs to have over winter. No, we are so far from that. When I read the questions to my husband, he said, "Eliza, you have to make sure you're honest, and they know that you get your Whole Foods delivery once a week."
Yeah.
Um, uh, so very far from that. We do, when there's vegetables from the garden to eat, we eat those vegetables. So our diets look maybe different over summer. I wouldn't buy
Mhm.
a tomato in January. I just wouldn't do that. Um, so summer is for BLTs and fresh salads from the garden, and we do some canning, because
Okay.
tomato sauce is so great when it's homegrown tomatoes in January are good to have. I do freeze some things, but yes,
Well, I
in
just want to let you know, I after hearing all of this, you are a homesteader. You don't have to be full blown. I mean, I know there's people that
no,
take it to the nth degree, but I mean, the reason I ask is because my husband and I have caught the bug as well.
yeah,
So we've started our own garden. My husband bakes his own bread. We have started canning a lot of, vegetables. He's started growing mushrooms. So the reason I ask, and kind of in tangent with this podcast, is there does seem to be a community growing of people that want to connect with the land and kind of go back to the basics and find value in that, whether that's full homesteading or just, you know, catching this bug that you and I
yeah,
certainly caught.
yeah, and I think COVID did a lot for that. There was a lot of people that started vegetable gardens during that time. I think also maybe part of it is that you and I have young children, and our peers are getting to a point in their lives where they might have some more time. I think one thing that people sort of uh, are struck by with me and my husband is that we started this all before we had kids, and I
Mhm.
think that's unusual, maybe. Uh, but I do think that there's something wonderful about it, because food from the garden tastes better. A cucumber picked that day tastes entirely different to a cucumber picked 4 or 5 days ago. Or if you slice into a potato that you grow, it looks different, it smells different, it feels different. So I grow a pretty good variety of vegetables, and I store enough garlic to get us through the winter, um, and things like that. And food you grow at home just tastes different. And
Yeah.
peppers I think is so striking because you don't get hot peppers like you do it
Hmm.
at home. So my husband makes a hot sauce every October with our bounty of peppers.
Yeah, my kids call our hot peppers from the garden blow your face off peppers
Yeah.
because they're so spicy. So do the kids help with gardening? Are they out there with you guys, or do they help with storage? Are they canning with you? How do you get the kids involved?
They do and they really don't.
Okay.
um, they're curious, especially my daughters are very curious and they love the flowers. And my daughter Nell loves to have a little posy beside her bed and she gets to pick. I have to be a little careful because sometimes she goes for the best dahlias and I say, no, no, you can't pick that one. She likes hot pink, of course. But we started the garden before we had kids. And for me, it was really an escape when my kids were very young and still napping. I would use that time to go out and work in the garden. And it's been a juggle, especially over the summertime, with having the kids home from school. And they're still quite young. So I have a 6, 4, and almost 3-year old. And so they help, but it's definitely my thing.
Mhm.
But it's been fun to watch them sort of develop their own curiosities about it. They love to pick the strawberries and the tomatoes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And this year, I actually planted, or the girls planted their own little flower garden because I
Aw.
I wanted them to have a space that they could sort of go wild in.
Mhm.
But yeah.
I love that. Okay, as far as your chickens, because I'm thinking of getting chickens, so now I have to ask you questions about it. How much is the like maintenance of it? And then also, what does like babysitting look like when you go on vacation?
um, Owning chickens is not economical. I will say that.
Hmm.
Um, uh, First you have to build the infrastructure, and definitely build it right the first time. Use half-inch wire, dig a trench 2 feet deep. Don't cut any corners because we last summer we lost about 16 chickens
Oh no.
to raccoons, which was very sad. And it's definitely not for the faint of heart because the raccoons did not finish the job, I will say.
Mhm.
um, but it's a wonderful, gift. I actually didn't eat eggs until I was 24 when I met my
Oh wow.
husband. We had chickens when I was a kid, but no one in my house ate eggs. Um, I think my parents were turned off when they were kids. They were fed this thing called an egg flip, and I think it's milk blended with raw egg. Not No wonder they don't eat eggs. But I have learned to love eggs, as have my brother and sister, which is quite funny. Uh, the maintenance is not that intensive. I clean the coop once a month, every month or two, less in winter. Babysitting is, John, my husband, jokes that our dogs could board, but we have a dog sitter for the chickens, which is probably true because, especially in winter, if it's really cold, they have a heater and they have heated water, so they're tough, but you know they take some effort, but they're definitely worth it. So definitely do it, but just know that it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's
And you
dirty
only use
and
it for eggs. Have you ever eaten one of your own
uh,
chickens?
I haven't. We don't. There you can either get layers, poultry, meat birds, or dual purpose.
Okay.
Dual purpose birds don't lay as many eggs, so I've killed some chickens. It's not really for me.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. You mentioned in your questions about would we ever consider having cattle. Um, I get too attached. You know,
Okay.
um,
So no cattle,
uh,
no pigs in your future.
no cattle, no pigs. I know someone that has goats. Goats are great for keeping down weeds. I couldn't see doing that because of they need a bigger purpose.
Hmm.
When we first moved here, I grew up horse riding, and I would love to have a horse. So maybe at some point in time, I could see having a horse. That would make me very happy. But I think that would have to be when I have more time on my hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And are you a cook?
I would say I'm a much better cook than I am a gardener.
Okay. Oh,
That
wow.
is,
So you're a fantastic
uh,
cook then.
um, oh, I mean, I'm definitely not a good gardener. I think it's just that I'm willing to try it out. Cooking is something I've done. I started when I was very young, and I love to cook.
Is there you said you're from Australia, so what kind of cuisine do you I mean, everyone knows this that listens. I'm a Long Island Italian, so I always, cook Italian. Is there like a specific type of cuisine that you always cook, or is it
Um,
everything?
it's a little bit of everything. Australians eat a lot of Italian, a lot of Mediterranean,
Okay.
and Middle Eastern food as well, and obviously a lot of Asian food.
Right.
Uh, Lots of Chinese, lots of Thai. Um I cook a little bit of everything. When my husband, when I ask him what he wants for dinner, I usually, say, "Give me a cuisine and give me a poultry, a protein," and then I'll go from there.
Right.
Um, so a little bit of everything. I cook a lot of. I hate to use the word Asian because it's so, but
Yeah, it's
you
every
know,
there's a large, yeah.
yeah. A lot of,
Chinese,
you
Japanese.
know, um, a lot of those sorts of flavors, and a lot of Middle Eastern and Greek food.
Gotcha.
Um, and then we do Sunday Italian. So
Oh, you do. You do like a
yeah, we
Sunday
do.
sauce every Sunday. I love that.
We usually do a Sunday sauce. Um, Less so in summer.
So you do a Sunday sauce. Is that you said you'd never buy a tomato in the winter? So what do you use, or are you fine like doing canned crushed
Um,
tomatoes?
we can. I use our sauce. I use our
You do.
tomatoes that I can. So I
Okay.
grow enough tomatoes to can sauce for. I make a tomato sauce. I do like a very plain. Some people can hold tomatoes. But I can the actual sauce. So I
The
do
sauce.
mozzarella. This mozzarella Hassan. You know, very plain sauce. And then if I want more flavors in it, I'll add that. But no
Yeah.
herbs or anything. Just tomato, garlic, and not even onion actually. And then I'll we use a lot of rayos as well because sometimes that fresh tomato sauce isn't what you're looking for. You
Hmm.
need the depth,
The salt.
and for some reason, the tomato sauce that I make doesn't have that sort of that richness
Gotcha.
that
Gotcha.
Rayo's just delivers so well. And it's like Ina Garten says, right? Store bought is fine. And I think Ina Garten also uses Rayo's as her source of choice.
I know. Well, I mean, my mom told me she brought Rayo's the other day, and I almost slapped her across the face.
Really?
I was
So
like,
how do you make your
"Mom!"
sauce?
I mean, to be fair, like it's not like I do anything that like I certainly don't use my own crushed tomatoes, but I just buy the like Cento crushed tomatoes in the
Yeah,
store that has nothing in it. It's just the
yeah,
tomatoes, and then I add garlic and oregano and salt and pepper and
yeah.
hot spice, all that. But
Um,
um
I mean, I think
yeah.
there isn't shame in that. Like in my freezer, I always have frozen peas and frozen corn,
Hmm.
and I use them in a lot of different things. And it's like that, if something is frozen at the source, that's much better than buying peas in the middle of winter. You can't. Well, I don't think you can even buy fresh peas in the middle of winter or fresh corn. But
Right.
I think if something is canned at its peak of freshness, then that's the best way to have it. If you can't have the real deal.
Yeah. So the people that you partner with that you sell some of their stuff through Longfield Farm, how did you meet them? Do you think they consider themselves homesteading type people, or is it just really niche, like someone just makes honey or someone just makes, XYZ? Like what are the people you partner with like? And what's that community like?
I know a few of them dabble. Red Bee Honey. I know she has a lovely garden, but that's for personal use, and she just sells her honey. And I think she's quite prolific in that industry. I think she might have even wrote the Honey for Dummies or something sort of book.
Okay.
Um, Pete Campbell, who has Horseshoe Farm in Ridgefield, where we get our maple syrup. We were connected to him when we were first learning to make our own maple syrup. And he was essentially who taught us to make it. He had a garden, and then this year has taken a pause. He had a proper farm. It's not really a garden. He has big greenhouses and stuff like that. He's taken a pause this year. I don't know if he'd consider himself a homesteader. I think the thing with homesteading is that it seems, from my outsider's perspective, to really do it, it would be quite consuming.
Hmm.
I don't think you would have the bandwidth to be making, jam to sell to other people if you were making your own jam and preserving it for yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Do you make your own soil? Like, are you composting?
I do compost.
Okay.
We on our long list of to-do items is to put in big compost bays that John can use the tractor to turn. But obviously, a garden produces waste, and so we just have some unsightly piles of waste around. And then, after a year, they're good to go back into the garden. The chickens are amazing for that.
Mm.
Uh, you're not meant to do it this way, but I put their waste directly into the garden.
Mm.
Uh, and I was just doing that this week actually. Now that the kids are in school and I have some time. Uh, and then in the bigger gardens, I do something called no dig, and I just use wood chips for that. So I'll put the compost into if I'm creating new beds, but for the no dig gardens, I'd put just wood chips. So our tree guy, a couple of times a year will drop off a load of wood chips for us, and I just spread them in the garden, and they feed the soil and keep it healthy, which is
What
good.
is the perk of a no dig garden versus like a regular garden that most of us are probably used to?
Well, composting a garden in general, it suppresses weeds, right? Because it means that
Hmm.
the light can't get to the seeds, and no dig, you're not turning the soil and bringing up previous year's seeds that have dropped into the soil. So, the composter on top of whatever seeds are down there. It retains moisture very well, especially the wood chips because they're so dense and they don't really break down as quickly as like sweet peat, which is the what we mulch our sort of the beds around the house with. Uh, yeah, it's just good for the
Gotcha.
soil, I
I
guess.
like it. I'm
and
gonna
you
have
don't
to look
and
into
you
that.
don't you don't break up sort of all the microorganisms that are down there in the soil. Sort of they're doing God's work under the soil without you needing to do too much
So is that
else.
best for like vegetable gardens and things like that, or do you use it for flowers as well?
For both,
Okay.
we don't have raised beds, so raised beds you do different things with. Uh, I like growing directly in the ground.
Hmm.
Raised beds are a little easier, I think, for weeds and stuff like that, but it's just not how we do it here.
Got
Um,
it. So for people that think that this is something they would be interested in doing, what would be your best piece of advice for getting started?
just to go buy some seeds and stuff. um, uh, I consider myself very much a beginner. Uh, my husband, in many ways, is the expert because he does the research, whereas I just, buy a plant and see what happens. He is much more learned than I am, but yeah, I think just to start and not to be afraid of making mistakes because you'll make them. Time and time again, you'll kill plants, and the weather won't cooperate, and deer will eat, or
Oh,
voles or mice or
the
whatever,
deer.
rabbits. Um, uh, when people do sort of take that bigger step towards building a garden, I always suggest to build a garden at least 1.5 to 2 times bigger than you think. you need,
Hmm.
because you'll never regret having more space. You can always, plant something easy or leave a bed, with some weed cloth on it. But life will take you through ebbs and flows where you'll have more time or more interest. And I think it's a mistake that's what we've learned in building gardens is that we always want more. So
Right.
so more space is better.
Okay, so what is the plan for Longfield Farm? I mean, how does it exist today now, and what is kind of your ideas for growing it in the future?
Um, Longfield Farm as a business, as opposed to just our home where we live. Uh, the last 2 years have been a sort of an experiment in figuring out what it is actually going to be, and it's been really fun. And I feel like it's sort of at a point now where it makes sense. Uh, I sell flowers, and I do some events with them. I sell these seasonal baskets, and we've been doing a farm stand every Friday, and that's been really really fun. There's been a lot of support from all the New Canaan moms in the community. As my kids, I still have a preschooler. I would love to sort of see things ramp up slowly, so that by the time she is in elementary school, I can consider it a real, a job, I guess, as a stay-at-home mom. To transition from being a stay-at-home mom with a little side hustle to having it be a real career, second
Hmm.
career. In your questions that you sent, you said 5 years versus 30 years. We, Longfield Farm as the home and garden is very much in its infancy. We're sort of starting to see things take shape now that we've taken down a lot of trees and put in, some new trees and, more stone walls and things, and in the places where they'll stay forever. But it is fun to think about in 30 years' time when those, apple trees that we planted now are at their full, size and production, and um, everything sort of come into place the way we envisioned it. My husband a couple of years ago drew on the computer very sort of intricate drawings of where we started, where we were then, and where we want it to be, and it's sort of we're on our way. So it's fun
I
fun
love
to think
that.
about where it will end up.
He drew you like a vision board. I
Yeah.
love that. Um, okay, so if people want to contact you at Longfield Farm or go to one of your Friday, I forgot what you called it.
Farm's done Friday. That's
Farm
sometimes on
stand
Saturday.
Friday. Yeah, okay. Where can they follow you? Where can they get information?
So I have an Instagram handle at Longfield Farm CT, and I usually announce, if the farm stand's happening on there. I know that not everyone has Instagram. I have a website, longfieldfarmct.com, and I have an email, longfieldfarmct at gmail.com. The CT is a little annoying, but obviously Longfield is not the most unique name. But
How did you come
uh,
up with the name? Was it just
uh, when we bought the property, there were two pear trees, very sick pear trees on the field. We tried to bring them back to life, and we were going to name it Twin Pears. We chopped
oh.
down the pear trees, so luckily we didn't do that. The pear trees were on a long field, so we have
Ah,
this sort of quite bucolic long field, and so we thought, long field.
I love it. That's
And
like
it,
the
and I should there's a Gil Schaefer house that is also called Longfield, so I have to give credit where credit is due. That probably inspired it a little bit too.
nice. I love that. All right. Well, this was such a fun conversation. Thank you for coming on. But I do have to ask you the same question I ask everyone at the end of every episode. And that is, what is your favorite family tradition and why?
We at the bottom of the long field, which is down by a reservoir, we have a campfire. And when I was a kid, we would go on horse rides and have barbecues. Australians eat these, sausages, snags that are just beef sausages, very plain, and lamb chops. And we go down there and we do bratwurst because you can't get those sausages here, but I'm working on it, and have lamb chops on an open fire. Less so in summertime, so this is now the season, fall, really fall and spring, to do that, and we all go down there and we do that, and it reminds me of my childhood, the flavors of my childhood, but as a cook, you know what that's like,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
just Simple, really, simple pleasures.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
Eliza, thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully everyone will check out Longfield Farm. So
All right. Thanks, Alex. Good luck with the chickens.
thank you.